And the first thing I want to say, which I think is so important for everybody listening, so many times I hear, well, the statistics say that the average adult today will have 6, 8, depends on where you're at, careers in their lifetime. So it's just something that we have to accept. And we know we're going to have turnover every 7 years or every 5 years. And my challenge to everybody that maybe is reading this and thinking this, why? And if that is really true, can't we stretch it? If the statistics say we're going to have turnover every 7 years in our leadership team and every 5 years in our operations team, can't we at least work towards stretching it? Why quit? Why give up?
Welcome to the Feed Science Podcast. I'm Adam Fahrenholz, coming to you from North Carolina State University and the Animal Food Manufacturing Program here, housed within the Prestige Department of Poultry Science. Thanks for joining us. As always, on behalf of Wisenetics, we certainly appreciate you being in our audience on YouTube or on whatever podcast delivery vehicle of your choice. Please do like, subscribe, and always give us suggestions and comments and feedback so that we know what you like and what you'd like to see more of. Excited today. My guest is going to be a little outside of some of the things we often do, or we're talking about manufacturing, or we're talking about nutrition, or we're specifically talking about something from kind of the operations side. And we're going to talk a lot more today about kind of the leadership side of how things operate, working with the people inside the facility. So my guest today is Amos McCoy. Amos is let's make sure I get this completely right, the owner of McCoy Leadership and Consulting, and he's also a leadership advisor for Feed Marketing Advisors. Amos, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Any opportunity I get to talk about leadership is a good opportunity. So interestingly, McCoy Leadership and Consulting, we started just about 3 years ago, and I went into that business because I've been in leadership roles throughout my life. I love leadership. And I thought, well, now's a time where I can start to teach others and bring up the next round of leaders in our local area. And I'll back up just a little bit that when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I lived beside a feed mill. And I started working there sorting bags. And by the time I left there when I was about 20, I was handling incoming grain and making feed and running delivery truck. And I decided that I wanted to try to find something that was maybe not quite as much lifting and as dusty as what the feed mill was. So I left and went to the concrete block industry. And lo and behold, I found out it's basically the exact same industry, except instead of putting it into a bag, we made a concrete block. And I spent just about 20 years in the concrete block industry. I left the concrete block industry to start my journey in education, and I took over as the CEO of a trades apprenticeship program in Hagerstown, Maryland. And for the past decade prior to McCoy Leadership, that's what I was doing, was training the next round of tradespeople coming up through. And as their CEO, I had the opportunity to not only grow the program, but really start to see some of the things that are out there that maybe we're lacking from a leadership side. So when I started McCoy Leadership, I found myself back in feed mills, not necessarily on purpose, but I met a group and became the leadership and training advisor for Feed Advisors, which maybe possibly some of our listeners might be clients of Feed Advisors or interacted with them. But Feed Advisors has probably about 50 advisors in all different roles, from safety, nutrition, operations, finance, and then, of course, leadership and training as well. And so I primarily today focus completely on feed mills, a few other local clients, but I spend a lot of my time working in feed mills.
Excellent. So I'm going to guess that, for a lot of our audience and they hear what you're talking about, their ears are perking up, because one thing, if I go out into our industry now and I say, what's the biggest problem that we face over the last, let's call it 2 decades, we've gotten a lot of answers like, regulatory burden, and that could be huge, and having to deal with inspections and that sort of stuff. We've always heard about things like hours and work-life balance, and certainly things related to what you said. It's hot or it's cold or it's dusty, it's dirty. But I'm pretty sure if I go ask everybody right now, like, what's your biggest concern, they're going to tell me workforce. Almost across the board, they're going to tell me workforce. They're going to say, it's hard for me to get people to come to the mill. And once I get people in the mill, it's hard for me to keep them there. And so I think a lot of that obviously has to do with trying to figure out where to pull our workforce from. But it also, I imagine, has a lot to do with figuring it out on the leadership side. How do we train the leaders that are going to be in our facilities, where to go look, how to hire, and then how to retain, how to build that connection with their employees, that those employees are going to want to stay? Is that track with what you think you see?
Absolutely. And also, over the past decade, I served, I believe, for 6 years as the chair of the Western Maryland Workforce Development Board. And Western Maryland is a very it's a very vast area in size, but the population is not that large. And one of the things that we hear over and over again, regardless of the industry, is we can't find people that want to work, and we can't keep the people here once we get them here. And the first thing I want to say, which I think is so important for everybody listening, so many times I hear, well, the statistics say that the average adult today will have 6, 8, depends on where you're at, careers in their lifetime. So it's just something that we have to accept. And we know we're going to have turnover every 7 years or every 5 years. And my challenge to everybody that maybe is reading this and thinking this, why? And if that is really true, can't we stretch it? If the statistics say we're going to have turnover every 7 years in our leadership team and every 5 years in our operations team, can't we at least work towards stretching it? Why quit? Why give up? So I think, yes, those statistics are real, but I think if we're doing a great job in leading those that are working for us and creating a great culture, we run an amazing opportunity of being able to keep them for 10, 15, 20 years. Are they going to stay to retirement? Maybe not. But if we can stretch that out, we know that's going to lower our costs. And the second part, I believe, comes back to communication and how we communicate with others. And I would even venture to say that you were talking before that about regulatory being such a big issue. And that inspection that's going to happen, we know we're going to get it. If we work really good at learning how to better communicate, can we maybe make that inspection go a little bit better? Early in my career, I had an amazing owner of a company that gave me some probably at that moment in time bad news. But he came to me and he said, look, you're a great diagnostic doctor, but your bedside manner is terrible. And I went home and I kind of thought, what did he mean by that? And I come to realize that I'm kind of a no-nonsense person by nature. So if something's broken, I'm going to tell you that it's broken and this is how you fix it. I'm not going to, I'm just going to give you those facts. That's my nature. And I really started to hone in on and understand more so why in a group of people, one person, every time they talk, everybody listens. And then there might be another person that is just struggling to get the opportunity to talk or struggling to be heard. What makes that difference? And it's all in how we interact with those people around us. If we surround ourselves only with people that are just like us, yes, we might be able to communicate well with them, but we're going to be missing the diversity that creates all the great things that happen in a business. And yes, I use that word diversity. And many times we think about diversity a certain way, but the reality is diversity is anytime you have people of a differing mindset working together. It can be groups of, groups that come from different backgrounds. That is diversity. But the reality is it all comes back to communication and how we interact with others.
One of the things that I know that we've talked a lot about here and we've talked about with some of our stakeholders is and we do this with some of our educational programs, is really trying to reach out to those folks that have maybe already ended up in the feed mill and they've decided this is a career they like, because maybe then we've solved some of the hurdle of, do I care if it's dusty? Do I care if it's dirty? Do I care if it's hot, cold? I'm having to do, manual labor as well as some pretty significant mental gymnastics from time to time. I like this. I would like to be able to do more within it. And so we think about educating those folks. But you kept using the words communication, and I know another word that you like to use is connection. And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, what are some of the practical steps to that communication, to that connection, when we've identified an employee that, okay, this is a, getting them in the door is hard, and there's only so much we can do about that with as far as how we recruit and market and things. But once they're there and we think this is a good employee who I think is someone that is interested and I would like to see them be a part of this team, what are those practical steps that we can do?
The first step is understanding that employee, what their values are. And why is that important? If we can understand what their values are and assure ourselves that they're matched with our company values, if they're in alignment, not necessarily matched, but in alignment with our company values and our company mission, now we know not only do we have somebody in the door that we like, we know that they're aligned with our company, and as we grow and grow them, that they're going to stay aligned with us. And that's the first step in seeing if it's going to be a good fit. The second step is to management and the leaders. Where do you want this person to go? And creating a plan and then sharing that plan. Now, that's the scary part, right? I don't know if I want to tell them that I think they have potential, because their head might get too big. We need to share that plan, that at least we have a direction and we see potential in you. And at least here's the next year. I would suggest here's the next 3 years and what we hope to do. Now we're going to go back to leadership. We have to be realistic. We have to look at that plan after we've created it, before we share it, and say, how am I going to achieve this? Who's going to train this person? I've seen in many feed mills where the owner says, well, I got a new mill manager and I'm bringing them on and I'm going to train them. Now, most mill managers, that we know, are busy. And what's going to happen is about the third day, they're going to say, well, I don't really have time to work with you today, so you can go out on your own and, learn on your own. And that's great. But then the fourth day, well, they did pretty good. I think they're okay on their own. And all of a sudden, our training plan falls apart. So that is the next piece, is create that plan, make sure it's realistic, and that you have the ability to be able to do the training to bring that person along. Next is, from the communication and connection point, we have to make that connection with that person. They can't be a number. And we may find out that maybe as we start down that process, worst case scenario, maybe we find out that person, maybe rubs us the wrong way sometimes. Why? How is that? And I think everybody's had the experience that you met somebody on day one and I don't like this person. They just kind of rub me the wrong way. Or maybe you think, I'd like to strangle this person. I don't know why, but I'd like to strangle them. And if we take the time to get to know that person and make a connection, oftentimes we find out that they become people that we really enjoy spending time with and being around. So taking time to make the connection. How do you make a connection? We make a connection by, one, being a little vulnerable, being personal with the person, and starting to understand who they are and get them to understand who we are and who our business is. Because if this is going to be a long-term relationship, they need to know all of those things. And then we're starting to make that connection with them. And then the third really big step is listen. When the person comes back with feedback, and the most important part about listening is do something with what you hear. Even if you disagree and think, well, I think they're wrong, they need a little more information, tell them that. But part of listening is action. many times I hear somebody say, well, I listen all the time. I brought my guys in, I brought my whole crew in. I listened to every complaint they had. What did you do? Well, I listened. Well, we need to do something. We need to have action out of that. And as long as it's a two-way communication back and forth, and we have a little bit of candor involved there, we're going to see that person starting to grow.
So just a quick reintroduction here. My guest today is Amos McCoy. Amos is the owner of McCoy Leadership and Consulting and is also the leadership advisor for the Feed Marketing Advisors. So a lot of what you talked about right there was on both sides of the coin, right? The people understanding how to be leaders and then also being able to evaluate our employees as well and then figure out where we go. And there's obviously tools that we have that we can use to do that, to both understand what our employees are good at or the ways in which they communicate, but probably, I mean, certainly just as important, if not more important, is actually understand that about ourselves. What are my qualities? And in some cases, what can I improve upon? Because we can all improve upon in something, but there are some things that are just inherent to us that maybe I shouldn't try to fight so much against. I should say, okay, this is part of who I am. How do I make this work? So I know that one of the tools that I think you got some interest in talking about is the DISC assessment. So I'd like you to explain what that is. I can tell you it's something that we work into the leadership course that we do here at NC State for our feed mill management and leadership class. And it's amazing. We usually take those first few weeks to do some things related to exactly that. What are my team values? What are my DISC values? These sorts of things. And I'll have people that are taking the coursework, not as undergrads, but are coming out from industry and doing some continuing education as part of our undergraduate certificate type programs. And they've maybe been working for 5-10 years. And this is something they've never done. They've never gone through a process like this, and they get done and they think, wow, I understand something about myself that I honestly didn't know. And I think that's a really cool thing. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how you guys use those kinds of tools.
Absolutely. So the method of DISC that the method of DISC that I am certified in is the John Maxwell method of DISC. And the reason that I mention that is there is one key thing that is different and very valuable in our industry is, when we take the DISC assessment, the assessment's going to grade us on 4 different areas, and it's going to tell us what our behavior style is. But we have 3 different graphs that we show. The first one is how we see ourselves. The second one is how we are under pressure. And the third one is how others see us. And that one under pressure is probably the most valuable, not only for ourselves, but for managers as well, because many times you can have somebody that maybe is not real high in the dominance category, but they're really high in the communication side. And what will happen is when they get under pressure, all of a sudden their communication is going to drop and their dominance is going to come way up. And what that tells us is that that person at that point when they're under pressure is going to start just getting things done and they're not going to talk, right? And understanding that about ourselves is so valuable that we now can start to identify these traits in other people as well. The biggest thing about DISC is it's not designed to put everybody in a box. It's designed that we are able to understand more about other people and we're able to communicate and connect with them on a better or on a different level or a deeper level. The other big tool that we have is we have DISC benchmarking, which is designed for the employers. And that allows the employer to create a DISC profile for a job on what they would like it to be like. But where it really helps is it helps them to be able to identify good questions to ask during the interview process and then give that potential employee a DISC assessment and see how they score against that benchmark, which is very valuable as well. I could probably take the next hour and a half and continue to talk about DISC, But the biggest piece that I like to make people think about is think about taking a trip and not having a map. You just know that you're going to go west. And eventually you're going to end at the Pacific Ocean. Now, I'm on the East Coast, so if I go west, eventually I'll end in the Pacific Ocean. But think about that journey, not having any idea, which turn to take, which highway to take, as opposed to taking a map and being able to map that out. And that's what DISC does for you, is it allows you to be able to map out that journey and understand when you get to a junction or a turn, which way to go.
I think something that I've always found interesting about it as well, and I'll raise my hand as one of the people I'm about to describe, that the first time this stuff comes up, but frankly, even still today, when someone says, okay, we're going to go through this process, I'm going to be one of those people that's going to roll my eyes a little bit and go, okay, we're going to go through some other assessment. We're going to, yes, okay, we're going to break out the psychology, right? But if you can get people to engage in it, they almost always come away with something interesting, because they're either going to find out, as I guess I said before, something interesting about themselves that they didn't know, or they're going to learn about something interesting about, not necessarily about themselves, but this is how I can work with other people, right? And that's going to have value to me no matter what. Even if I feel like I understand myself very well, learning that there are ways that I can approach other people with these same sorts of tools is something that's going to get everybody's attention.
Absolutely. One of the things for me personally, I'm a high D, so I'm very dominant, which also means I like bullet points. I'm a very results oriented. It's very easy for me to focus on the result and forget about the people. And by having this knowledge and having the assessment myself, I recognize that now. And when I go in to sit down with an I will actually slow myself down a little bit and try to match their energy and ask, how was the weekend? The reality is I don't care how their weekend was. I just want to get to the point and get something done, right? But I've learned that if I can do that our communication and our connection is going to be that much better. And lo and behold, oftentimes I find myself saying, oh, you went fly fishing. I like to fly fish. Now we have something in common. And that commonality will help again to make that connection. How would have I ever known that I had something in common with that person unless I would have taken the time to ask a few questions and to find out what those things are or what they did on the weekend. So again, as far as making a connection, this can turn you from, being a small band that's playing the local fair to being a rock star that is traveling the country, just by being able to understand. And as well, in the feed mill industry, it's all about relationships. The more we grow our circle of influence, the more impactful we are going to be, whether it be with our brand, or it be just creating relationships and having people to call on whenever we run into something we haven't seen before.
Yeah, the relationship part is absolutely huge, it seems like, in what we do. When there are a few different times where this comes up in a few different outreach type things, where we ask people to reach out and talk to mill managers and what do they like about their job, dislike about their job. And I mentioned some of the things before, the regulatory or the actual process of trying to find people and hire. But at the same time, we almost always hear mill managers say, one of the things you like about your job is the team that I have. Because if they can get people into their facility and they can figure out how to get through it seems like it's almost just a year. It's not even that long. It's like a year. There's a chance that those people are going to work together now for 2 decades or longer, because it's like, okay, we've found this common value. We found that we can work together. You actually, I've joked before about going down the road here to the folks that do all the genetics work on campus and see if I can find the feed milling gene for whatever it is that makes us want to keep going into the mill, because I think it might be a mutation and it might be a negative one. But you you will run into these mills where it's like, on the one hand, I've been through 15 operators and I can't, or I've been through, 6 maintenance folks or something. But the flip side is true too, where it's just like, well, maybe I've been through 15 operators, but my maintenance guy's been with me for 30 years, or I've been through 6 maintenance guys, but this guy that's running the pellet mill, he's been here since before I got here, and he's doing as good a job today as he was, 25 years ago. And it's that connection point, and it's that we have figured out how to talk to each other and coexist. And it's not always, because we're the same. It's because we've figured out something that works for us. And that seems to really play a role in kind of what you described as this like pressurized environment that's also, somewhere in between being a manufacturing environment and an agricultural farm environment. It's really unique in that way.
It is. And I mean, with what you just described, what DISC brings is the ability to put a little bit of science behind understanding why do you get along and communicate with the maintenance man that stayed for 15 years, and why have you not got along and been able to keep those others. And I give you one little short story. When I started in the feed mill industry as a very young man, there was a gentleman that out of Hershey, PA, that delivered vitamins to our feed mill. Came every 2 weeks in his pickup truck, stacked full, and I would always go help him unload. And I would listen to him. And I just knew him as Mr. Winters. That was his name. It's all I knew. And as time went on, I got to know him a little bit, because I took time not only to unload him, but talk while I was unloading him. And one day he came in and he said, "Hey, I published my book." He said, "I wanted to give you a copy of it." And I was maybe 14 years old, and I took the copy of the book. I could see the front of it. I realized he must have been in World War II, continued to unload his vitamins for another 5 years or whatever it was till I left there. I go to the next job, a few years pass, and I'm sitting at home one night and I'm watching the Emmy Awards. And I see Steven Spielberg up on stage saying, "This movie wouldn't have been possible if it wouldn't have been for the book that this man wrote. And I want to invite my great friend, Mr. Dick Winters, to the stage." And I just sat there in awe. When I went back to the mill and talked to some of the folks that were there, many of them saw him just as many times as I did, but had no idea who he was. And that's the power of connection. Is I had people that worked beside me that didn't know who Dick Winters was. And for any of our listeners that aren't sure, Dick Winters wrote the book that Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan was based on. And most everybody has seen those movies. But that's that power of connection.
Yeah, no, that's a great story.
It's time for our famous 3.
Wisenetics turns podcast airtime into brand authority. We don't sell ads, we elevate voices. Curious how far your voice can go to become a reference in the industry and attract more leads? Scan the QR code and discover how we can turn your expertise into unmatched brand authority. Let's transform expertise into influence. Starting now.
We're going to run out of time here shortly. So I've got a couple things left that I want to ask. One thing in particular, being that I'm sitting here in an academic department at a university, and we know that a lot of the folks that are going to matriculate into our industry, into our feed mills, are going to be younger, are going to be young folks coming in, and they might be coming out of high school, coming in as a labor type job, or truck driving, those sorts of things, operator level. We're going to have those associate degree 2-year folks are going to come in at maybe the entry level management. We're going to have 4-year degrees that are coming in at middle management and working towards upper management. We got all these different folks that might come in from an education background going into the job, whether that be a high school education, college education, whatever. And one thing that we hear a lot from stakeholders is that while students may have technical expertise in a particular field, or some are better at math and some are better at science and some are better at various different things, some are not very good at those things as well. One thing that no matter which age range or education range we're talking about, we hear a ton about they do not have an understanding of how to be a professional, how to work either in a leadership position or to accept leadership. Many of them maybe haven't really had much of a job like maybe in the past would have been the case, working through high school and working through college or whatever else. And they see that a lot. Like they don't know how to look someone in the eye and have a conversation. Any thoughts on that as far as, what we can be doing, in our education systems, what students themselves should be trying to expose themselves to so that they can, both accept leadership and then become leaders at some point?
First of all, I don't know anybody that has created or made a better connection with another human being by presenting facts. But I do know a lot of people that have made a better connection by telling a story. And probably my most valuable piece of information or advice on this angle is learn how to take the facts and turn them into a story. Being able to tell a story or talk about a past time, but presenting those facts because they're important, but doing it in the fashion of a story is going to help create a connection and is going to help you communicate that message better. Everybody listening at home, raise your hand if you've been in a meeting where you realized that it was going to be death by PowerPoint. How did you feel? And think about another meeting where maybe you accomplished just as much, but it was somebody telling a story or offering advice or relaying it in a different way. So learning how to become a storyteller is probably the most important piece of communicating. What can they be exposing themselves to? Work around people. Get involved in your local community. The more you learn from others and the more you communicate, the better you become at it. This is not something, that's the best news for everybody. When I started out, I was a horrible communicator. We can learn to become better communicators. If you're fresh out of high school and your mom is telling you that you're the best communicator ever, you need to go talk to some other people as well. All I'm saying is grow your circle of influence and get out there. Chamber events are a great place to go and start to work your way around, look people in the eye and have a conversation. The last piece is learning how and why you're going to communicate. Today, I'll back up. 90% of what people get out of our communication is not from what we say, but our body language and our tone. Now, if you take a person-to-person interaction and you remove the person-to-person part and you go to email or you go to text, what's missing?
Yeah, tone.
The tone, and the body language. And, so make sure that you understand why are you communicating. If I really only have one fact to give you, I can shoot you a text. But if I want to gauge how you're feeling about something, I can't do that via text or email or WhatsApp or whatever the newest thing that will come out. So think about ways that you can interact with people.
That's a great point. That I like that a lot. So we always end up closing out the podcast, kind of talking and asking our guests about things like resources. And this works really well in this case because that's very much what you're in, is in the resource business. So would love to hear more about what goes on with the feed marketing advisors and your role there and how they help and can help folks, as well as I know some of the other things you're doing specifically within your company, your own resources, podcasts, and things you do. So would love to give you a few minutes to share what those opportunities are for folks.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, anybody in the feed mill industry, if you're interested in learning more, or maybe even in your own company, you're looking to do some training, reach out, feedadvisors.com. And you can find email addresses on there. You can find contact information, but reach out, engage with feedadvisors.com. Secondarily, McCoy Leadership, we have a podcast, the McCoy Leadership Podcast. We're just coming up on about 100 episodes recorded. I think we have 70 or so released, but it's another great resource. We're talking to leadership experts from around the world, and we are hearing all kinds of different takes on leadership, communication. We even get into work-life balance. We've spent a significant amount of time talking about that as well. So another great resource. And then McCoyLeadership.com, which also will get you a link to Feed Advisors as well. But another great resource. You can see some of the things that we're doing. You can see our upcoming calendar from there as well. Right now, I think there's only one or two things popped into the calendar, but we constantly are having virtual lunch and learns as well as having full-on mastermind classes. So another great place to look.
Excellent. Yeah, a lot of good resources out there, and I will echo that. The resources exist, and take advantage of them where you can. There's only so many hours in the day. And so sometimes your allegory about traveling without the map, right? Similar situation of, you can try to reinvent the wheel, or you can take the time and a little bit of the investment to go to folks that have done it before and do it often, and then get you there way quicker. And that's always that's always a kind of a nice cheat code to things. So I think that's a great bit of advice.
And I will say within the Feed Advisors group, very rarely, and I'm thinking over the past couple of years, maybe one time I heard somebody say, I've never seen that. Almost every time. Just remember, when you're in the industry, you're a catastrophe that's happening right in front of you. Somebody else has probably already went through it, and reach out.
Yeah, there's not too many. We certainly have our catastrophes, but you're right. Not very many of them are the first time. You definitely don't want to be the first time. I'm sure of that. All right. Well, it's been a great conversation, Amos. I really appreciate your time. I really enjoy this particular topic. I think it's incredibly important to what we do, and I think it's also kind of fun to get into the mind and the psyche a little bit of how we operate. We spend enough time, turning wrenches and meeting production schedules that sometimes it's nice to step back and think about. Yeah, well, it's kind of what's between everybody's ears that actually makes this work. Without that, that nothing turns on and nothing gets done. So
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun here as well.
All right. Yeah, it's my pleasure. All right. Well, on behalf of Amos, on behalf of Wisenetics, and on behalf of myself, again, I'm Adam Fernholz, and this has been the Feed Science Podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you the next time.